Hi there, it's Kareem from Keeper's Nursery. Today is the 15th of May 2025 and I'm making quite a late video about apple pollination. So this is hand pollination that I'm doing to breed new apple varieties. So first things first, I'm in the nursery. Behind me and all around me are loads and loads of mother trees. So here we've got about in these 3 rows about 600 different apple varieties, which as you can see are not in flower anymore because it's sort of mid-May now. The reason I'm doing the video now, not because I'm behind, but there are still literally 1 or 2 varieties that are in flower still. This is Médaille d'Or, this is a French cider variety, but it's actually quite a good time to do this video because the majority of flowers have finished and we have fruitlets set, so I can almost cover every stage of the process of the pollination rather than doing the video back in April when everything was just flowers. I mean, it would have looked way nicer, but this is actually probably more useful for making a video. So first things first, if you want to do some hand pollination, you need to get yourself some pollen. Now pollen obviously is on the flowers. So these anthers here, there we go, there's some camera work. So these anthers here in the balloon stage are what we want. So you need to actually collect up, actually what I would do is pick off flowers. So you just pinch them off and then you basically just want to pull out all these yellow lumpy things, which are the anthers, which are basically, these are unripe. Now these anthers down here, come on camera. Ooh, yeah, these ones which have gone golden, these are now ripe and will hopefully have a bit of pollen on them. So if you do this, so you take them all off and you get yourself some jars, you end up with jars. That's not a very good one. Yeah, you can sort of see the dusty stuff inside. So there we go, there's a better one. So this one, you can see all of these anthers in there. They've all gone nice and sort of golden, and all that dusty stuff inside is pollen, which should hopefully be good for quite a long time. I'm going to keep this for next season and see how they go. Important to label them. So that's Hamid's Red Pippin. So basically, with the pollen, you pick a whole lot of flowers from the tree during this sort of balloon stage. You then put those all in, well, I tend to use these little Tupperwares again, labeling them again, take them up into the house, spend about 2 hours prying off basically picking off all of the yellow anthers, leaving those in jam jars, which is where they're eventually going to end up. So put them all in jam jars, leave the lids off and just leave them to dry for sort of a day or 2 in the conservatory. So they get sort of, over time, they basically will release more and more pollen. You can actually sort of smush them up to get loads of pollen out of them. I've seen someone actually sort of sieve them to get the pollen. But for my purposes, there's enough pollen in there. So that's stage 1. So you want your pollen. Simultaneously, so you have to go to however many trees you want pollen from. So you obviously make a list in advance and you think, okay, so I want to go to, let's say, Médaille d'Or. That's going to be tricky because Médaille d'Or actually is in flowers so late you'd actually have to collect pollen this year to pollinate trees in 2026. But most other things, yes, you want to, there are generally about sort of a week, 2 weeks, yeah, more than a week, but maybe 2 weeks of blooming, sort of at a stage where you can pollinate trees. So collect pollen just before the flowers open. More or less you're covered, unless you're trying to pollinate something particularly early with something that flowers very late. That's not going to work out, but the other way around is perfectly fine. Simultaneously, you want to bag up unopened flowers. So again, this lot of flowers here, great camera work again. So this lot of flowers haven't been visited by, or I can presume maybe this one has, you could just pull that off, but these haven't yet been pollinated. So flowers looking more like this, it's anyone's bet. There probably have been bees coming along, and most of these might be pollinated. Who knows? Obviously some of them are still in a balloon stage, so those won't, so you could pull those off. But you basically want to put one of these bags on. These are sort of organza bags that you can get, which are gift bags. I get the sort of 30 by 40 centimeter ones, which are actually quite tricky to get hold of in the UK. They're probably about 40p each. They last several years. You basically bag up, and this goes over the top of the tree, of the branch, beg your pardon. So once that's over the branch, that means that pollinators can't come in. Also, it's very, very conspicuous, so you know exactly how many you've got. So I can see there are some there. That's great. You then come back a few weeks, well, sorry, not a few weeks later, you come back a few days later, and now this is the important thing. You want quite warm weather. This year has been an excellent pollination year because when the flowers were out, the weather was very warm. This also meant that the flowering periods were actually quite short because everything was just working out very well for the trees. Basically, if pollination were to happen, if you were to hand pollinate a tree and you had a chilly sort of 10 or 5 degree day where there's just a chilly north wind, right now there is actually a bit of a cold north wind behind me. It is only maybe around 10 degrees right now, but it is early in the morning. The fertilization won't actually be successful, or the chances of it are lower, and that's basically the tree doesn't let the sort of, it just won't. The tree has got more flowers than it needs to be pollinated. You know, if you looked at every single apple tree, but well, I mean, you can see on this one right now, there are so many fruitlets on this tree. So most of the flowers have reached this sort of stage where there was successful pollination and they're fruitlets, but a lot of these will actually start to fall off quite easily because the tree basically just thinks, okay, well, there's too much fruit here, I'm going to abort most of this. It will overbear and it will basically kill itself if left to its own devices. So when it's cold, the trees don't really want to sort of, they'll wait for better weather. For whatever reason, I should maybe know because I'm a biologist, but you can probably assume that there is a reason behind it. Maybe it's got something to do with pollinators as well, but it doesn't matter. But if you're going to do hand pollination, unfortunately, sort of last year when I was doing hand pollination, it barely reached above 15 degrees most days. It wasn't particularly nice spring, so I had relatively low success with the hand pollination. This year, as they say, touch wood, you know, I'm counting the chickens before they've hatched, but it looks like there's actually quite a lot of success, and that could be an issue because I might end up with too many seeds. If you imagine I can show you right now. I will get back to what the process is, but over here, for example, this is a bag on the Cheerful Gold tree. So that's Cheerful Gold is the mummy, and the daddy, the pollen, has come from seedling 82. So that's Primrose Pippin. So I've got notes. I've got clipboard with loads of notes on, but basically it's important to take notes. I pollinated this on the 21st and I think the 25th of May. It's a relatively late flower, not as late as the Midai. So inside this bag, I've put the bags back on. Basically, you pollinate them and you take the bag off, and you take the bag off to pollinate, and then you put the bag back on. Let me pause the video. Hey, that was actually quite tricky. So inside you can see there are already, that was terrible camera work, sorry. Inside you can see already there are fruitlets forming. So that's success. There are some that shriveled up. That means that it wasn't successful. This one maybe, this one no. So, and you can generally see at the bottom of the bag how many sort of fail, which is fine. If this bag has probably got, oh gosh, there's loads at the back there. So this bag might have up to 10 fruitlets in. That is almost too many. I'm going to do the bag up in a sec, but if you work out each fruit might have up to 10 seeds in. That could be 100 seeds of just this cross, and I've got 100 of these bags on different trees. Maybe this is not representative of all of them, but I've certainly seen some bags which have got tons more fruit in. Maybe I've got better at doing this. It certainly wasn't difficult. There are less fruits. There's less success than if you leave it to nature, but at the same time, 100 bags with 100 seeds in is 10,000 seeds. I currently work at just over I can do about 500 seeds a year. So that's 20 times what I can actually do in a year. So that's 20 years worth of seeds. Yeah, that will be too many for me to deal with. I will have to then pick and choose. But having said that, that is, again, things can happen to seeds between now and when the this is optimistic. You should always do more than you need, because some of those fruits will actually not ripen. Some of those, when you hand pollinate, you realize that some apples will only have 1 or 2 seeds in, because basically you've barely done a good enough job of pollination that it does actually have the fruitlet will actually form, and it will form into an apple, but it barely had enough pollen to actually produce like viable seeds. So you might have 5 apples, but you only end up with 5 seeds in, which isn't the worst case scenario if I've then got to process all of these. Also, if you end up with moths and caterpillar, all the caterpillar larvae inside the apples, they burrow straight in and go for seeds. So you can lose tons of seeds like that as well. So at this stage, you want way too many. I guess worst case scenario, you end up with too many seeds. Anyway, this year looks good. That's all I'm saying. This year the weather was good enough, which is good. And I will turn around and, well, once I'm done with this video, I'll bag that up. The reason I can continue to bag the trees up is, yes, you obviously want to know which branch. Now these bags will be fine. Basically, some birds might come along and rip the bags off. I had that issue with some of the very early varieties. Basically, the birds only go for the really early stuff. They're obviously going to go for the cherries. I bag the cherries up, but early red varieties, sort of talking July, I don't think there's as much food for them then, so they'll shred through these bags. But any other time of the year, I've never had a problem. But then I don't have things like parakeets, so if you do have those, watch out. But the reason for the bags is so I know which apples are like the apples that I want to keep. I used to actually sort of just label the branches in a more conspicuous way, but actually having the bags there is useful because for whatever reason, if someone comes to visit, they realize that maybe I should leave that alone. And also, if the fruit somehow falls off, it's not labeled, it will fall on the floor and get lost amongst others. I'm talking about in sort of October time when everything's ripe. If you've got the bag there, at least it will just fall into the bag. So, keep the bags on the trees. It might not look great if this is in your garden, but you just gotta sort of do something. Anyway, back to actual pollination. Okay, so let's pretend that these are all bagged up and I'm coming along with my pollen. So I've made my list of what I've done. I've written down a label, which I've not got. I will get my applicator. Come on. Then I will get my pollen. Hold on. Oh, it opened. So an applicator, it's just got, oh, that's awful camera work. How do we do this? There's my hand. There you go, camera. So it's an applicator. Oh gosh. Anyway, you get the applicator, you rub it around in here, and you can hopefully see. Gosh, I'm awful at this today. I'm sorry. You end up with pollen. Ta-da! Well done. So you see the yellow bit at the end of the applicator? That is all pollen. Now, I'm not going to do this with the applicator because that's just too hard whilst holding a camera. But use your imagination, folks. Basically, in the middle... Okay, I'm going to do a better job of this. In the middle of the flower, so you've got all the petals. Come on, camera. There you go. In the middle of the camera. In the middle of the camera. Good grief. Let's zoom in, actually. Oh, that's good zoom. Yeah, in the middle, you can hopefully see the little green curly bits. Yeah, you can see the green curly bits. So you're not interested in the anthers, you're interested in the stigma and the style. So basically the stigma is the sticky bit at the end of the green curly bits, and with the applicator you basically rub some pollen. Wow, look at that finger. You rub that pollen onto the ends there, and you sort of do it in a haphazard way. Now the only thing is, obviously, if you're doing that and let's say these anthers are riper, so you can basically pull the petals off here, and actually, so you can pull petals off and sort of apply pollen onto sort of the anthers at this stage as well. It doesn't hurt, and you kind of want to come back and do this once or twice more, just to sort of make sure that you're pollinating at the right time. Problem is, obviously, there could be pollen on these, and pollen loves to stick to basically everything. So the applicator will get covered in pollen from this flower, but it's already got the pollen from the jar that you selected to pollinate this with. Now, generally speaking, most apples are self-sterile, so you can use that applicator for all of these. But if you start dipping your applicator back into your jar, you're mixing this pollen with the one that you have actually painstakingly sort of isolated. So you go through a few applicators. It's not the end of the world, folks. I think the number of applicators that are thrown away every year are in the billions, but I'm not glad about that, but yeah, you just that's the way that you don't sort of contaminate everything. So once that's done, bag it up again and leave that basically bag it up, come back to it. As I said, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You basically are doing what a bee does. You basically take pollen from one flower and you put it on the other one. The complicated bit is just isolating the flower, making sure the temperature's right, getting that pollen ready, and then using an applicator of some sort, and then making sure that you don't cross-contaminate what you're doing. And then once you've labeled it and you put the bag on, whenever it will be that apple ripens, be it September, October, November, you then pick the apples off, you take the seeds out, put those in a damp kitchen cloth, put those straight in the fridge. I don't like to dry them. I think that you just put them straight in the fridge. Nearly all of those will come straight into, they will start to germinate, so the roots will come out the pointy bit of the seed, because apple, the teardrop shape, the pointy bit of the teardrop, a nice white root will come out after about sort of 2 months, so that will be Christmas time or just after Christmas time for most apples. Take it out of the fridge at that stage, put those in soil, and the rest, you know what you're doing. Now, I suppose if you don't have somewhere warm for those to actually grow for the months of sort of January and February and March, maybe you could actually store those so that the germination happens to coincide when the weather's warmer. But from my point of view, I'm growing them as soon as I can so that they reach a nice tall size, so that I can actually I can basically rush through that juvenile stage quite quickly. They're grown in a glass house. Right now, the seedlings that I germinated in December time, so that was last year's job, those are now well over 50 centimeters tall. They've basically reached the point where they're falling over the apple trees, so I need to sort of put canes in them, which is actually quite a pain. Constantly watering them. If you do grow things in glass houses, you also get red spider mites, so you have to treat for that. There are lots of biological controls you can use for that, these little bags of, I guess, nematodes or something, or other mites. But yeah, it's a good process. Hopefully this video helps people understand, because you can sort of see, obviously, there are fruitlets around, and that's quite good to see. And you can see that it all seems to work, because there are fruitlets, and these are all going to be harvested for seeds later. So anyway, thank you very, very much for watching. I don't know what the next videos will be about, probably same old stuff. Bye.